Right now you're warm, and you probably don't even register it. Somewhere on a wall in your home sits a small dial, and the instant the air dips below a certain point, a machine quietly fixes the problem before your body even notices there was one. You move from a heated house to a heated car to a heated building, and the coldest moment of your entire day is probably the handful of seconds spent crossing between them. Winter for you is scraping frost off a windshield. It's grabbing a heavier coat. For nearly all of human history, though, winter wasn't an inconvenience. It was the season built to kill you, and it never came at you from just one direction. It hit from 4 angles at once. Cold that could finish you, hunger that could finish you, animals that could finish you, and long black nights that could wear you down before the other 3 even got their turn. So here's the real question. With no furnace, no grocery store, no walls that actually stop the wind, how did people survive winter at all for hundreds of thousands of years? Because they did. Your ancestors walked directly into some of the harshest environments on the planet and came out the other side. And how they pulled that off is one of the more remarkable things our species has ever done. Start with the obvious enemy, cold itself. Here's a fact most people never think about. The human body is fundamentally a tropical machine. We evolved in the warm belt of Africa, and an unprotected human loses fast in freezing conditions. Hypothermia can set in within hours. Fingers seize up, thinking slows to a crawl. Past a certain point, everything shuts down at once. No claws, no thick natural coat, nothing built in for insulation. By almost any measure, humans are among the worst equipped large animals on Earth for surviving brutal cold. And yet, we didn't just survive it, we marched straight into it, pushing north into Ice Age Europe, into Siberia, into places where winter temperatures dropped far below anything a bare human body can tolerate. So, how? The first answer is fire, and we'll come back to what fire meant for the long nights shortly. But fire has a flaw. It only warms the side of you facing it, and it doesn't travel with you. The moment you step away to gather wood or hunt, the cold rushes straight back in. Fire alone was never going to be enough. What people actually needed was a way to carry warmth around their own bodies everywhere they went. Which brings us to, arguably, the single most important piece of winter technology humans ever invented: clothing. Not the version you're probably picturing. For a long stretch, the logic was simple. It's cold, so you drape a hide over your shoulders and call it solved. And for a while, that's exactly what people did. But a draped hide leaves gaps everywhere. Wind slips in at the sides. Arms hang exposed. The whole thing shifts and slides off the moment you move. A draped pelt beats nothing, but in a real winter, beating nothing still gets you killed. The actual breakthrough was learning to cut hides into shaped pieces and stitch them back together to match the human body. Fitted sleeves, closed seams, a garment that sealed a pocket of warm air directly against the skin and kept it there, no matter how much you moved. That's the entire difference between a blanket and a coat. But here's the catch. To do that, you need a needle, specifically one with an eye, a tiny opening for thread. That's a genuinely difficult object to make. You take a splinter of bone, grind it into a fine point, then bore a hole through it small enough to stay delicate, but sturdy enough not to snap. Archaeologists have found bone needles like this, dating back more than 40,000 years, with some finds pushing even earlier. These aren't accidental scraps. They're precise, intentional tools made by people who knew exactly what job they were solving for. The thread came from the animal, too. Sinew, the tough connective fiber linking muscle to bone, could be pulled free, dried, and used to bind hides together permanently. Layer a garment like that with a fur facing inward, and a person could stand in air cold enough to kill and stay alive inside their own private pocket of warmth. Sewn clothing wasn't a luxury. It was the technology that let our species leave the warm continent it evolved in and colonize the coldest regions on Earth. Take away the needle and thread, and there's no human population making it through an Ice Age Siberian winter. So now you're warm enough to move, to work, to hunt. But the light is fading, the temperature is still dropping, and a second problem shows up that no coat can solve. You need somewhere to survive the night. The obvious answer is a cave, and caves genuinely helped. A deep cave holds a stable temperature, blocks wind, keeps snow off your head. But here's what people don't mention about caves. They're rare. A good, dry, defensible cave in a sensible spot was hard to find. And if you did find one, chances are someone else wanted it too. You couldn't count on a cave being available. If you needed shelter, more often than not, you had to build it yourself. And this is where things get genuinely remarkable. At a site called Mezhyrich in modern-day Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered dwellings built roughly 15,000 years ago in a landscape with almost no timber and almost no stone. So people built with the one raw material available in enormous supply, mammoth bones. They stacked and interlocked the remains of dozens of mammoths into round, dome-shaped structures. Hundreds of bones per dwelling, jawbones layered like shingles, massive tusks arched over the entrances. These weren't quick, disposable shelters. They were serious engineered constructions, meant to hold through a brutal winter, and they demanded real planning and real labor to assemble. Inside, every effort went toward trapping heat. Floors got lined. At a site in South Africa, researchers found evidence of bedding made from carefully layered grass and leaves dating back a staggering 77,000 years. People were making shelter genuinely comfortable long before our species had even left the African continent. And the effort didn't stop at the floor. Think about that mammoth-bone hut for a second. Bone doesn't fit together seamlessly. There are gaps everywhere, and every gap is an open door for wind. So people sealed them layer after layer, stretching hides across the interior walls, pinning them over openings, cutting blocks of turf and stacking them against the outer walls, sometimes even packing snow directly against the structure, since a thick layer of snow is actually an excellent insulator, trapping pockets of air, and trapped air holds heat. Bit by bit, the wind ran out of places to get through. A shelter stopped being just walls. It became a whole integrated system, and it kept people alive on nights that should have killed them. But a well-sealed shelter creates its own problem, and it's a serious one. Keeping a fire burning through a long winter takes fuel, a huge amount of it. And gathering fuel means someone has to keep stepping back out into the cold again and again, all season long. You're effectively tied to that shelter, which means the food you need has to already be close by or already stored, which leads directly to the third threat, and arguably the deadliest one, hunger. Here's something modern life has completely erased from memory. In winter, the land simply stops producing food. Plants die back or go dormant. Berries disappear. Roots become nearly impossible to dig out of frozen ground. Most animals have either moved on, gone into hiding, or grown thin and desperate themselves. For a hunter-gatherer, winter isn't just cold. It's the season when the earth itself stops feeding you. That turns survival into arithmetic. You have to gather enough during the warm months to carry an entire group through months when almost nothing new arrives. So ancient people became genuinely skilled at food preservation, using a handful of brilliant methods. The first was drying. Slice meat thin, let it dry in sunlight or over low smoke, and you pull the moisture out entirely. Without moisture, it can't rot. Dried meat could last for months, and smoke added a second layer of preservation on top of drying itself. A rack of drying meat in autumn functioned, in every practical sense, as a group's insurance policy against starving by late winter. The second method turned the cold itself into a tool. Frozen groundworks as a natural freezer, so people dug pits into the permafrost, packed them with meat from a good kill, and the cold kept it edible for a remarkably long stretch. Winter, the very thing trying to starve them, became the thing preserving the food that kept them alive. But the single most valuable winter food wasn't meat exactly, it was fat. When your body burns huge amounts of energy just staying warm, lean meat alone isn't enough. Fat is the densest energy source available, and deep in winter, it will be worth more than almost anything else. Ancient people rendered animal fat into a stable, storable substance and combined it with dried meat into a dense, long-lasting ration. packing enormous calories into something small and portable. In a season where every calorie counted, fat was the difference between a group that reached spring and one that didn't. So now you're warm, you're sheltered, and you've stockpiled enough food. You've beaten 3 of winter's 4 death sentences. But there's a fourth, and it's the one people almost never think about, because it doesn't attack the body. It attacks the mind, the darkness. In winter, especially the farther north you go, days shrink and nights stretch out brutally long, sometimes only a handful of usable daylight hours, followed by 15 or 16 hours of cold darkness with nothing obvious to do. But wait, you can't travel far. You can't hunt effectively in the dark. You're confined to a small space with the same small group of people for weeks on end, and that kind of enclosure, that constant waiting, wears a person down in a way that cold and hunger never quite manage on their own. But here's what ancient people did with those long dark hours. They didn't just endure them, they filled them completely. This was the time for every task that didn't need daylight or good weather. Sitting near the fire, repairing tools, shaping fresh spear points, mending clothing, twisting plant fiber into cord, carving. The long night wasn't wasted time, it was workshop time. The stretch when a group prepared everything it would need, the instant the weather finally broke. And it was more than just labor. Around that winter fire, in the dark, is where people talked, where elders passed down everything they knew to the young, where the same stories got retold again and again, carrying a group's memory and knowledge forward across generations. A huge share of what we now call human culture, myths, songs, shared knowledge, was likely forged in exactly these conditions. In 2014, researcher Polly Wiesner published a study examining nighttime conversation among the Jew/Hwansi of the Kalahari and found that after dark, talk shifted overwhelmingly away from practical matters toward stories, song, and ritual. Firelight itself seemed to change what people were willing to share. People pressed together against the darkness, keeping each other warm, keeping each other sane, keeping each other human until the light came back. Winter didn't just test the body. In a strange way, it built the mind. Step back and look at the whole picture, and something striking comes into focus. Winter didn't just get survived. Winter shaped us. The pressure of cold pushed people to invent fitted, sewn clothing. The scarcity of caves pushed them to invent real architecture. The seasonal gap in food pushed them to invent storage and preservation. And the long dark nights account for a massive share of where culture itself was likely formed. Nearly every technology that let our species spread into every climate on the planet was forged in the struggle to survive the cold. The harshest season on Earth didn't just fail to wipe us out. It made us far more capable than we had any right to be. So here's the complete picture. Winter came at your ancestors with 4 weapons: the cold, and they answered with fire, and fitted, sewn clothing; the night, and they answered by building shelter out of whatever the land offered, even the bones of mammoths; the hunger, and they answered by drying, freezing, and rendering food into stores that could carry a group for months; and the darkness, and they answered by turning the longest, coldest nights into the workshop and classroom where human culture itself was born. Every single winter was a test a great many people failed. Survival was never guaranteed. It was earned every single year through preparation, skill, and sheer stubbornness. And now look at you. You turn a dial, and the room warms up. You open a door, and there's food grown on the other side of the planet in the dead of December. And you've never once in your life felt the specific dread of watching the first snowfall and wondering whether you'd stored enough to see spring. You don't survive winter anymore. You barely register it. And that's not because winter got any gentler. It's because 100,000 years of human beings freezing, starving, and huddling together in the dark slowly figured out how to beat it, one invention at a time, so that you never would have to.